What's going on, everybody? It's your host Mark with High Tech Tutorials, and today we're going to be building a quick little app that should be loads of fun to build. This particular app is a app that uses the YouTube API to be able to display information from a given playlist. In this particular case, we have picked the Swift News playlist because it's a really great show that I like, put on by Sean Allen, where he takes all of the most common or popular news in the Swift community for that week and puts it together in like a 15-minute little episode to consume some information. And it's really, really good information. And one of the reasons I wanted to make this app was because there were some cases where I was working on a new project and I want to remember, like, what was that episode that he talked about this one cool thing. So let's say, for example, I want to, hot thing on the street is coordinators. I want to look up coordinators. I can just type in coordinators in my search and find, oh, it was episode 43. I click on set episode, loads it up. Then I can come here and play the episode. We could do it in however it may be. But yeah, you have all that information. And in addition to that, because Sean is so awesome, he's also added all of the necessary information as far as like the links related to each particular episode, which is really, really good. So really great, like lots of information here that we just, can do so much more with. But that's going to be the basic of the app. Really, is just to pull down the data from YouTube, allow us to search it, do what we need to do, and go from there. So let's get started. All right. So what we're going to do is let's go ahead and jump to Xcode real quick and build out a new project. Now, at the moment, I am working with Xcode Beta, but as the start of this video, they actually already have Xcode 10.2 already out. So I just didn't get a chance to completely download that. But nonetheless, it's all the same. It's going to be Swift 5. Not sure if we're going to be using too many Swift 5 features directly per se, but we'll see. So let's just call this our Swift News app. And let's launch it on the desktop. And one of the things I like to do anytime I start any project off is let me just build and run. Make sure I get the blank slate. Make sure the plumbing's all hooked up, because nothing sucks more than working and come to find out like something's missing. So we just want to get started. We make sure we're good here, so we're good to go. All right, cool. So one of the things I want to do first is let's first knock out the UI. And when I say UI, if we look here on the Swift News app, we have pretty simple UI where we have just an image with the Swift News. We have a title and we have a timestamp label. And that timestamp is pretty much just going to be when the episode was aired. You have a month ago, 1 month ago, 2 months ago, so on and so forth, 3 months ago. So cool. So that's really what we're going to build out in this first episode, is just let's knock the UI out. And then in the second episode, we'll look at taking on some new challenges from there. So let's come over to our storyboard. First things first, we're going to get rid of our current view controller because we want a table view controller. So hopefully my computer plays nice with us tonight. Table view controller. And all works the way it wants to, because these computers can sometimes be off the chain. Nonetheless, all right, we got our table view controller. Let's go ahead and drag this to about, 360 or so. That should give us more than enough room. I'm going to go ahead and make my background just a light gray, just so we can kind of see the area that we're working with. Now, for those of you that are a little new, this particular episode is going to be, or this particular video is going to be somewhat late beginner to intermediate. So I'm not going to slow down as much, but in future videos, there will be a much slower pace and much more detailed information. But I just want to knock this out real quick just so we can get to the more nitty gritty and interesting parts. So let's come over here, and what we're going to also add is our table view cell, which is already there. I want to add an image view. We're going to drag that here. I don't know, set that about here, yay or so. And we also need a few labels. So let's grab a couple of labels. We'll grab one, we'll grab another. Command Shift L is also the shortcut to bring this up much quicker, if you're curious. So now that we have our label, we have most of our UI pretty much set. Let's just add our constraints. We're going to go ahead and constrain this video cell here. 12 from the top, 16 on both sides. So let's come here and say, all right, let's make you 12 from the top and 16, not all of that, on both sides. And let's also set it to be aspect ratio. And what we're going to do here is we're going to modify that aspect ratio constraint, and we want to set it to 4:3, because that's going to work the best for us. And then we'll drag our labels down here. All right. So now that we've set up our 4:3 and we have our different labels, I want to go ahead and give this particular label, let's give ourselves some more room with our cell. All right, so this particular label here is going to go all the way across. Maybe it's about yay high. And let's set some information here. Let's set our font size. Our font's going to be Avenir Next. We're just going to zoom through this here. I know you guys want the fun stuff. And let's say I think I did about demi bold on this with a font size of approximately 15 points. And from there, once we have that set in place, let's go ahead and constrain this to say, as a matter of fact, we won't do the constraints on that yet because we're going to pin it. And here we're going to do one more label, and let's set our fonts. This one's going to go roughly about the same width as well. And let's set the font to be Avenir Next as well. Avenir Next, regular. Let's drop this to about, I don't know, maybe we were doing 12. I think 12 should work, which looks really small on the screen here, but trust and assure it will be good. So let's now that we have this set, I want to make sure that this is left justified. This is also, we're not necessarily going to set anything here. Number of lines are going to be 2 because we want to guarantee that we have 2 lines. So let's just type in some text that should be approximately 2 lines. All right, so that just gives us an idea that we can fit 2 lines with our current height. Which is probably all we're going to need for the time being. Lots of ways to improve this, and eventually we'll probably add some support for dynamic type for users that like to bump up their text size. But for now, for simplicity, we'll keep it this way. So let's go ahead and pin this to the bottom. And we're going to say that this is pinned about, let's say 8 from the bottom, 16 on both sides, and it has a height of, I'd say about 17 or so. And now that we've pinned that, we can actually set this, I'm going to bring my cells. Well, it shouldn't be that tall. But now we're just going to say you are going to be about 12 from the top of the image view, maybe 8 from here, and 16 on both sides. All right, so that lets that grow. There's not going to be that much space, so we could probably dump it down just a little more. Let's say about there. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. All right, cool. So now that we have that set, we're almost done with our UI. Let's bring in our image. I have a image ready for us that we can certainly bring in. Makes it life a little easier. All right, so now that we have that set in our assets, we should be able to click on our image, come over to the image selection here, and go to Swift News. And bada bing, bada boom, we have that set. We're gonna set it to be aspect fill because we should be fairly good with, and the reason why we set the aspect ratio before is because I knew in advance the aspect ratio of the image. And in order to ensure that our 50 never gets clipped or any of the text here never gets clipped, setting it by 4:3 will always make sure that based on the width of the device, it will adjust the height accordingly to keep that 4:3 ratio, which is going to ensure that our image always stays nice and center and displays properly. So, all right. So now that we have that set, what we're going to want to do is now probably get into some code to get the data set up the way we want to. So let's come into our view controller file. First thing we're going to want to do here is make this a UI table view controller. And now that we've done that, just to make sure before we forget, let's come here and set the class for our view controller to be that. So what that does is it connects, of course, our interface to our actual code. All right. So now that we have that set, we're ready to rock and roll with some code real quick. So first things first, we're going to go ahead and set up our specific methods that are necessary for any table view. And that's going to be number of rows in section, cell for row at, and our estimated height in this particular case, which is not required, but we need it because we want our cells to be dynamic as they grow. So first, let's do our, let's say number of rows in section. And what we're going to do with number of rows is, for the moment, we're just going to return 5, just 5 dummy rows. And I'll come back and explain that later. In our cell for row at, what we're going to do is here we're going to build out our actual cell. What does our cell represent? Our cell is essentially going to represent one of these things. This whole thing represents one cell or one piece of information. So coming back here, what we're going to first do is create a cell, or DQ a cell to be specific. And let's call it a video cell, index path, and we're going to return a cell. Now what we want to do, because we created a custom cell, we're going to want to go ahead and create that, because we're going to want that instead of this generic cell that we're going to, this standard UI table view cell that we get from the table view. So with that being said, let's come up here and Command N to a new file and Cocoa Touch class, and we're going to call this our playlist item cell instead of that. Playlist item cell, UI table view cell subclass, and let's go ahead and create it. And we're not going to need any of this for now, so let's get rid of all of that. And now that we've created this cell, what we want to do is we want to set our storyboard to this custom cell. So if we come here and select our cell in question, we can go to the class, set that to a playlist item cell. And what that's going to now allow us to do is connect our UI elements to the actual custom cell class we just created. So I'm going to hold down the Option key and click on Playlist Item Cell, which is going to automatically create my split view here. And from here, I can just click on this, hold down Control, drag to set up a relationship between my UI and my code. I can let go and name it. I'll call this the item image view. And let's call this the item title label. And this one will be our item timestamp label. All right, cool. So now we actually have basic, but we have 3 outlets in our playlist item cell that give us access to these particular UI elements in our code. So I'm going to close out the assistant editor, come back here, and now let's go into our view controller file. And what we're going to do is now we want to specifically get a playlist item cell instead of the UI table view cell. So what I'm going to do is call a guard here, and I'm going to cast this one as a playlist item cell. And if you cannot perform that, I'm going to go ahead and crash, throw a fatal error, and say could not DQ playlist item cell. All right. So that's what this code is saying. Hey, go ahead and DQ a cell with the identifier of video cell as a playlist item cell and return it to me. And if you can't do that, go ahead and crash. Something must have gone horribly wrong. Just bail. So before I forget, what we're going to want to do is set the reuse identifier for the cell we just created, so we don't crash, because that's a crasher. So if we come to our cell here and select the attributes inspector, there's an area for identifier. We can drop that string there, and that connects that. And if we now come back, we're creating our cell. One of the things we're going to want to do is let's just set some a default dummy title, so we have some title information to play with. So if we come here and say cell dot item title label, and we'll set the text property of that, and we'll just say testing 1 2 3 4 5, and we'll set our cell dot item timestamp label text field to 29, that's fine too, hours ago. All right, so once that's set and we have those particular things in place, the next thing we want to do is set up our height, because what we're going to want to do is when we look at our particular cell, there are going to be different titles. Some of them only 2 lines. Some of them could be more. In this case, we've constrained it to 2, but we want to be able to kind of let the table view determine what the height should be for each one of these cells based on the constraints we've given it. So we told it that this thing has to be pinned here, 16 from the left, 16 from the right. From the top, it's got to be 12, and it's always going to be a 4:3 aspect ratio. So it knows how large this is going to be. And then we told it, well, this guy is 16 from the left, 8 from the bottom, and 16 to the right, and also has a height of 17. We could verify that by coming over here to the size inspector. And we could see here that we have a height of 17. So it knows that this label is always going to be 17. And then we told it this particular thing, just anchor it in between this guy and that guy. So with that being said, auto layout has everything it needs to be able to determine how large each one of these cells needs to be. So with that being said, we're going to come over and we're going to add a method here that says estimated height for row at. And we're just going to return some arbitrary number. We're going to say, let's say it's roughly 360. Could be more, could be less, but that just gives it a ballpark range. And in order to activate that and make sure that we get let the table view do those estimations, there are a few properties that we could set, such as the estimated row height, and we'll specify that this is 360. And we'll also come here and say that the table view row height should be able to UI table view dot automatic dimension. With that being set, and we have our row height, these things probably are constants that could be extracted elsewhere so that we don't have these random numbers, as well as this string here, but we can cover that another time. We should have enough, unless I did something wrong and forgot something, to run and see what we're working with. And of course, this is black and nothing showing up. And part of the reason that is happening is because we actually, if we go down here, did not set an entry point for our view controller. Remember earlier in the video, we deleted our old view controller and we added a new one. Well, when you add a new one, what you don't get for free is the fact that it gets set as the initial view controller. So if we come here, click on this guy to say that, hey, this is our initial entry point when you launch the app, we should be much more luckier. And of course, we also do not have data here because of the fact that there's something else going on. So let's figure out what the heck is going on here. Here, instead of doing number of rows, we only provided number of sections, and this should be number of rows, not number of sections. All right, let's build it out. And there we go. And we have this gray background that we forgot to remove, but let's go ahead and come back into our storyboard. And we no longer need that cell to have that gray background because we have our layout the way we want it. Let's come back and run it. And there you go. So for the most part, we have the first part of our UI built out. In the next video, we're gonna go ahead and start to look at creating our data model to represent all of the different information that we want from our Swift News app. That's going to allow us to display the title, the description, and all of the other information, as well as a link to the video to be able to play the video. I look forward to getting that knocked out and moving on to the next video.